Modern day, St. Thomas, the U.S. Virgin Islands. The U.S. VIs are a pristine setting that is a hotbed for tourism and all sorts of ocean activities such as snorkeling, pristine white sand beaches, thriving bar and restaurant scenes, and numerous high-end resorts. However, from what I could find, a video was posted to the social media app TikTok detailing an encounter a young woman had while vacationing at the Ritz Carlton resort on St. Thomas. This encounter that she proceeds to detail in the video on the surface seems very strange. And then when she goes and checks out the reviews of the resort, she uncovers perhaps a deeper conspiracy between the hotel and perhaps child sex trafficking. Today on Unblurring the Unknown, we try to figure out if there is any basis in this conspiracy, or is this just some sort of manufactured internet hoax? Is there something more significant going on between the hotels and sex trafficking? Or perhaps, is this just a conspiracy that is being influenced by Jeffrey Epstein's actions throughout the 2000s? Today, we investigate the Ritz-Carlton St. Thomas wink conspiracy. Welcome back to Unblurring the Unknown. As always, I am your host, Dominic, and today's episode was very much a spur-of-the-moment one. Now, previous to this, I have not heard of this topic, and before just the other day, I'd never heard about it, didn't even have any knowledge of it, anything like that. And originally this week, I was planning to do something totally different. And when I found this, I found it very compelling, and given how there seems to be little to no information available about this topic, it also compelled me to figure out whether or not this seemed to be genuine, or perhaps maybe this is just one big hoax, or maybe kind of just a tall tale, or just a story with no basis in reality. Now, with that being said, this episode is going to contain reoccurring themes of sex trafficking, and that is sometimes uncomfortable to talk about. So if that does make you uncomfortable, I do suggest checking out one of my other episodes. Now, with that being said, today's episode might also be a little bit different than what you might be used to, just in terms of formatting, and that is because information on this, and on this topic in general, is incredibly limited. So what I will be going off of will be what I was able to find for information regarding the Ritz-Carlton in St. Thomas, the TikToks covering this topic, and then other information in regards to Jeffrey Epstein's ties to the area and his relations with the government structures of the U.S. VIs. Now, of course, like I said, this was a spur-of-the-moment topic, and I was actually really motivated to do this topic as I got originally sent this TikTok, and I checked it out, or a TikTok that discussed this. And I'm like, this is very interesting, and then I started doing my preliminary research into it. And as somebody who has gone to the U.S. Virgin Islands to vacation before on both St. Thomas and St. John, I felt very motivated by this, as, you know, obviously I've never been to the Ritz-Carlton, of course, but I've been in that area, so it was interesting to me, and I wanted to follow up with it, and I wanted to do my research on it, and that's kind of why you're getting this episode this week. But with that being said, let's get into where this story seems to originate from. And that being the TikTok that started it. Or at least from what I could find anyways. Now, the original post came from a user named @Leda Fazal. And if I pronounce that right, I do apologize. AKA Leda Hair Pro. So that's like so her username is Leda Fazal. And then her kind of username is Leda Hair Pro. And she is a hairstylist from North Carolina. And she originally posted the video in regards to the Ritz-Carlton on March 24th of this year. Now, she would go on to do a couple follow-up videos and reply to the people in her comment section, but for the episode's sake, I am just going to play the first video for you. Now, just a little context here. This video gained significant attention, with it racking up a whopping 4.7 million views and 422,000 likes. Now, that is substantial. A lot of people saw this, and people did do other TikToks about it. However, it was very limited. But with that being said, I'm going to play that original TikTok for you right now.
Cannot sleep about this. I'm thinking about this constantly. And this is a trigger warning. I'll put it down here about why. By the end of this video, if you think I'm crazy, then just comment delete. I'll just delete this video. If you think I'm onto something, then share it and spread the word. I went to St. Thomas last week, just last week. We did take a boat ride. We saw the St. Little James, which is Epstein Island, which no longer really exists, blah, blah, blah. But while we were staying in St. Thomas, we were staying at the Ritz in St. Thomas. This is important. I've never been to a Ritz. I was expecting like a whole lot nicer. It was cool. It was nice. It wasn't bad. But I found it strange that the kids that were there, they were very like well-behaved children. They weren't like your crazy kids like I grew up. I don't know. Like they're very quiet and just I don't know, it was just odd. It was just eerie. It was just like an eerie, weird thing. On my last day there, I paid no mind to it. I was just like, yeah, family, this is what rich people do, I guess, whatever. This little girl is wearing a one-piece bathing suit, but the back of her bathing suit is like so pulled up, almost looks like a wedgie, and a lot is showing. And I'm like, this is weird. This is the morning of like my last day there. And I was like, surely her parents will put it down and I'm going to go on. I went to the beach, came back later on that evening to go in the pool, and her bathing suit was still the same. And then I'm thinking, look, maybe it's like a European thing. I don't know. It was strange to me. Then me and another couple are standing by the ledge, and it's not very deep at all. And this little girl actually runs right in between us. And she's like, oh, I need to get on the ledge. I need to get on the ledge. I think she was hoping one of the men would pick her up. Well, the other girl I was with picked her up. And then the way that she like went on top of the ground, she literally showed everything that me and my two guy friends and my other friend looked at each other like, whoa, that's weird. We just looked away and we went about her business. Next second, I'm like, what is up with this little girl? Next second, I see her getting walked off by a staff member. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe it's just a freaking weird thing. And then I came home, and it's been 5 days, 6 days, and all I could think about was this little girl and how it was just strange. I can't really explain. I'm giving you the best that I possibly can. And then I said, you know what? Let me go to the reviews on St. Thomas, on the Ritz Carlton, because sometimes these reviews have these little weird things in them.
Okay, here we go. So what is wink? What is wink? What does that mean?
Am I crazy? Is Ritz Carlton St. Thomas the new Epstein Island? I don't know, man. That's freaking weird. What do you think? Is this a reach? Am I crazy? Or do you think this is something's going on? All right, let me know.
All right. Definitely kind of a lot to unpack there. But I think the big thing here is trying to unpack the meaning of this quote-unquote wink in the reviews, and by the sounds, the TikTok is implying that there is some sort of child sex trafficking being done at the Ritz-Carlton. Now, those reviews could very well be fake. However, I'm going to save that till the end. Let's dive into the possibilities of what this quote-unquote wink could possibly mean. And then after that, I want to dive into some of the reviews I found of the Ritz-Carlton, and then we'll kind of talk about Jeffrey Epstein's involvement in the area, and maybe whether or not that plays a role in this story. Again, kind of a little different format that I've done before, but I just want to make sure everybody's kind of following along with me here. So firstly, in that TikTok, she mentions reviews about the Ritz-Carlton, and them referring to this quote-unquote wink, or wink as in like, the kind of the wink-wink, nudge-nudge, like you know what I'm talking about. I want to see if I could figure out these reviews, or that I could find them, that are mentioned in the TikTok. And when going through TikTok, it seems that other content creators found them as well, but when I started digging, I found nothing. It didn't matter what website I checked, whether it was TripAdvisor, whether it was Google Reviews, whether it was even Ritz-Carlton's personal website. I checked pretty much everywhere that had a review about the Ritz-Carlton, and I found nothing. Nothing in regards to kind of a wink or a review mentioning a wink. Now, that could just be because the reviews were initially up and then deleted as maybe the story got more popular on social media. But my counter to that is that if you were trying to cover up something in the first place that you probably should not be doing, why risk it and leave the reviews up in the first place? To me, that just doesn't make any sense. Now, the only reviews on the Ritz-Carlton website, Google, and TripAdvisor that I could find were pretty much service-related instances. And even, in these reviews, a lot of them were kind of negative about the Ritz-Carlton, and they had detailed accounts about some guests having trouble with dirty linens, cockroaches and bugs in the rooms, and the service just not being kind of Ritz-Carlton quality that you expect. I think when anybody hears the name Ritz-Carlton, you think of the best of the best. And clearly, the Ritz-Carlton on St. Thomas does not have the best of the best. That is clear. You go through those reviews and you find it. It is not the best of the best. But no mention of any winks. So if you are planning a trip to the St. Thomas or the U.S. Virgin Islands, don't stay at the Ritz-Carlton because the reviews are really, really bad. There's a couple good ones, but they're mostly bad. Now, there was also some reviews about guests being upset about the reoccurring power problems that are currently happening on the island that leaves them without AC. Now, of course, if you've ever been to the Caribbean at all, it is hot. It is humid. It is muggy. It is almost unbearably humid at times. So AC is extremely valuable. And when the power repeatedly goes out, you have no air conditioning, and therefore you are very uncomfortable. And somebody who would be staying on the Ritz-Carlton and spending, $800 to $1,000 a night on a room, that sounds crazy, but that's realistic. You'd be pissed that you have no air conditioning. Obviously, this is a little off topic, but don't stay at the Ritz-Carlton. Just don't. Now, again, I dug through enough of these to where I could find out about AC problems and power outages and how that the food sometimes sucks and that it's really bland. And I didn't find anything about this wink. Now, of course, this kind of, the whole idea of wink, you know what I'm talking about, I feel like that can mean multiple things. Now, I think adults know kind of wink as an idea of like I mentioned before, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, to imply something inappropriate or sexual in nature, or even maybe a secret that everyone might not know about. Now, someone in the comments of the initial TikTok video said to find the meaning about quote-unquote wink under Urban Dictionary, and that would be what it means. And when I Googled that, it was kind of just unhinged comments and really didn't explain the meaning of the wink, because people can just kind of put in their own meanings and definitions on Urban Dictionary, so that concept is kind of thrown out the window. And I don't expect anybody to actually go on Urban Dictionary and use that as a source in terms of word definition. So when I saw that, I was kind of I will check this out, but I'm not really going to take this for granted, because you're probably a middle-aged person saying, oh, check out Urban Dictionary, it means this. Do you know what Urban Dictionary is? That's not really something that you should be that's a source, that's what it means. No, don't take what Urban Dictionary says and apply it to fact. I don't think Urban Dictionary and fact should be used in the same sentence. Now, another idea that has been proposed is that, obviously the wink kind of plays into account with the child sex trafficking stuff that seems to be mentioned in the TikToks. But some people have also proposed that maybe the wink is referring to an app of the same name. Now, the Wink app is a social media app that acts like a dating site and a friend-making site. But originally, the app was used as kind of a bridge between Snapchat and searching up profiles for Snapchat. Now, when it was that first iteration, and it was this bridge that kind of allowed you to search up profiles, it was very much targeted towards kids. And there was no way of protecting your kids from predatory behavior, as at the time the app existed in this format, you could set age settings and restrictions to target young children specifically. Now, that is a massive red flag. Obviously, this is not what the app is now. However, this isn't me trying to reach, because I know these things happen out there. So maybe it kind of rebranded away from this kind of Snapchat bridge app thing to this dating app. I'm not really sure why this happened in the first place, but I could clearly tell that at some point it went from this bridge Snapchat app to a dating site. And that dating site does target young people. However, targeting kids specifically is kind of a little bit of a gray area currently. Now, do I think that this is what the reviews are referencing right now? I don't think so. And I think that kind of seems too specific and a little too out there. Since the Wink app is now being used as a dating site and doesn't seem to be targeting kids specifically, I'm not fully sold. Obviously, the original version of the app that allowed you to target certain ages and certain demographics, that's a massive red flag. If it was still that version, I would probably hold more merit to this idea that maybe they're talking about this app and they are meeting with young kids on this app at the resort, and that's kind of what they're meaning. However, that doesn't seem to be the case. Now, another thought that came into my head while trying to think about information on this, and whether or not there could actually be sex trafficking going on at the Ritz Carlton, another thought popped into my head. And that being that maybe the quote-unquote wink isn't referring to what the original TikTok is thinking it means. Maybe, in fact, this wink is referring to other adult activity between other adults, such as swingers. Now, I am not going to go into detail about what swingers are. I think a majority of us know what swingers are and what they kind of like to partake in. But it begs the question that maybe they are loving to the resort because they're able to wink, with other couples and kind of, that's why people are like, okay, it's got the best views in the island, wink, So that is a possibility, and this could be it. However, there is a review that was posted in the original TikTok from Leda saying that this was the new quote-unquote Epstein Island. Which, that comment could very well just be a troll fake comment. But perhaps every theory here is a little bit of a reach, based on the idea that we have no info to go off of whatsoever. We have to assume that something could be going on the surface, but we have no evidence to prove that. However, the Ritz-Carltons are extremely expensive, like I mentioned before, and they're really targeted towards the ultra-wealthy, and we know that the ultra-wealthy sometimes like to do some funky shit. So them being swingers or maybe participating in activities such as that, and then saying like, oh, maybe you should check out this, this resort. You can partake in a little wink, nudge, nudge. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility whatsoever. Now, our last kind of little theory here, like sub-theory as we're on the topic of the resort still, is that before we move into the rest of this episode and we discuss the other little sub-points, is that maybe this is real. Maybe this is actually happening. And on the surface, this might be a little hard to believe. What we know is that the reviews mentioning the wink were up for a longer period of time, as people mentioned in the comment sections of all the TikToks posted by Leda back in March. Now, these comments mentioned that the reviews were still up, and some of them were actually recent. Now, if this in fact was a cover-up by the resort, you would think that anyone who had made a review regarding a wink or regarding anything mentioning anything in regards to sexual activity, it would have been taken down upon posting. Now, also, the Ritz-Carlton is a hotel chain that is owned by Marriott, one of the largest hotel brands in the entire world. If this in fact was real, not only would the Ritz have to cover it up, but also corporate Marriott would have to as well. And that seems like a monumental task without any information about this going on being leaked to the public. Now, it would tarnish Marriott's entire brand, and the amount of money they would lose would be extraordinary. Now, as of right now, I just don't see an instance where on the surface this could be real, but rather than maybe some sex thing that wealthy guests take part of while staying there on the resort. Now, of course, as we go through this episode, you will see my opinions slightly change, because I'm going to present some kind of statistics, some facts, and some other findings while doing my research. However, keep what we've talked about in terms of theories in the back of your mind as we continue to go through this. But with that being said, I wanted to see actually how frequent sex trafficking was at hotels, just to get a broader scope of perhaps whether or not this could be something that is going on at the Ritz. Now, according to ourrescue.org, it turns out that sex trafficking within hotels is not uncommon. It's actually extremely frequent. Now, this is because of multiple reasons, such as ease of access, ability to pay with cash, and leave no paper trail behind, and even at some properties, there is a lack of facilities upkeep, maintenance, and security, allowing pretty much easy access for these criminals to get in and out and smuggle and traffic people. Now, this article on ourrescue.org cited a quote from EHL, which is a hospitality group from Switzerland, stating the following: Their revenue streams and operations are increasingly being automated. For example, automatic check-ins, check-outs, third-party reservation systems, non-mandatory registration and identification, guest privacy and anonymity all prevent hoteliers and staff members from knowing the real identity of their customers or what they are doing behind closed doors. Now, this is all very truthful information. I know that some hotels are a little more strict compared to others, and that plays a factor in this as well. But prior to my research into this, I had the suspicion that, in fact, hotels were safe from this kind of activity. That was my personal idea anyway. I'm like, there's no way. Hotels are very professional. They're strict, a lot of the ones that you go to. But that is clearly not true. Hotels have become a hotbed for this type of activity, and they are starting to face a slew of legal problems for not stepping up and preventing this activity when it is being witnessed by staff members and other guests. This is because an employee could be perhaps involved with the activity, perhaps something is arranged in which the hotel benefits financially from letting this happen, or maybe this is just neglect, and maybe people just not taking action when something looks suspicious. Now, just in the previous years, there have been numerous high-profile trafficking cases hitting the court systems in regards to trafficking at hotels. Now, with that being said, let me name a few, just in the past, basically 2 years, in 2023 and 2024. Now, in December of 2023, the hotel chain Red Roof Inn would settle a lawsuit from 4 women who alleged of being sex trafficked at 2 separate locations in the Atlanta, Georgia metro area. The women accused the properties of being safe havens for sex traffickers and even claimed that the company profited off the exploitation of these victims. Now, in July of 2023, 4 sex trafficking victims filed lawsuits in Texas claiming that the Studio 6 and Motel 6 hotel chains ignore the crimes taking place on their properties. The law firm representing the victims goes on to state that hotels are often turning a blind eye to this type of behavior, or worse, actively participating in it. In April of 2023, over 40 sexual trafficking lawsuits were filed against major hotel companies through Babin Law, a law firm out of Columbus, Ohio. These lawsuits were filed against major companies such as Wyndham Hotels and Resorts and Choice International. And lastly, in June 4th of this year, a lawsuit was filed against numerous prolific hotels in Las Vegas, such as the Aria Resort and Casino, the Wynn Las Vegas, the Venetian Las Vegas, and the New York Hotel. The victim in this lawsuit was coerced into prostitution by a trafficker and was taken to these properties and forced to engage in sexual acts, and the victim of the abuse claimed the hotel knew what was going on but did nothing to stop, as she said that she displayed clear signs of abuse, malnutrition, and displayed injuries, and the hotel staff did nothing to intervene or contact authorities. Now, with that information being said, it kind of changes my opinion a little bit on what could be at play if, in fact, this rumor about the Ritz Carlton St. Thomas is real, and that if they are actively participating in some type of human or child sex trafficking. But it begs the question, could it even be possible, or maybe perhaps something else is contributing to this? Maybe something else is influencing this story or influencing it from the outside. Maybe perhaps Jeffrey Epstein's crimes contributed to maybe the sex trafficking going on in the USVI. Now, of course, trafficking happens everywhere, but the location of this entire story makes it noteworthy. Of course, Jeffrey Epstein split his time between his multiple residences, with the most notable being the Little St. James Island, where his compound was, and he had his villas and multiple other kind of guest houses. And this is where most of his sex crimes took place. Now, the Ritz-Carlton sits on the far east end of the island near the Wyndham of St. Thomas, and right off the coast of this eastern peninsula is Great St. James and then Little St. James. Now, they are remarkably close to each other. You could pull up a map, zoom out just one frame, and you would see all three. They are that close to each other. Now, with Jeffrey Epstein's quote-unquote suicide in 2019, the island sat unused. That is until last year, until they were both purchased by billionaire Stephen Dekoff. Now, who is Stephen Dekoff? Now, Stephen bought both of the islands, Great St. James and Little St. James, for an asking price of $60 million. After that price tag was dramatically reduced by the real estate company who was selling it. Now, Dekoff, like I said, is a billionaire, but he is also the CEO of Black Diamond Capital Management, which is a privately owned asset management company. Now, we could really go down the rabbit hole of these large asset management companies and how they influence the world, political figures, and even Hollywood, but perhaps we will save that for a future episode. Now, Deckhoff has plans to build a resort on the island with an anticipated opening date of next year. Now, I kind of find it humorous that the island was again bought by another billionaire who, this one, actually runs a company that is kind of very murky in the eyes of everyday Americans. You know, we can talk about these asset management companies, and I could talk about them for days. It's just kind of ironic that you go from one shady guy to possibly another shady guy. It's kind of poetic, actually. Now, while Jeffrey Epstein had a profound impact on that area, it is also worth noting that the Virgin Islands benefited greatly by Epstein being down there in the islands. Now, why do I mention this? I'm mentioning this because if this type of behavior is still going on today, and Epstein had paid people off to turn a blind eye to his actions, it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that maybe someone else is still doing the same things to this day. Now, one of Epstein's most trusted employees was actually the First Lady of the USVIs. Now, the government of the USVI is pretty much ignored all of Epstein's crimes while he had a residence on Little St. James Island, and it was pretty much well known after his 2008 conviction in Palm Beach, Florida, that we kind of knew what was going on. Obviously, his 2008 conviction was for soliciting a minor for sex, and this pretty much exposed to the greater public what was going on at his island and the crimes he was committing against minors. Now, because of this, and eventually everything coming to light, is when Epstein was arrested and convicted on all of the crimes. Now, more recently, a slew of lawsuits have taken place and have been filed against the businesses, individuals, and business partners that did dealings with Epstein, claiming damages, sexual assault, and blatant negligence in regards to not exposing the crimes taking place. It also happens that the government of the USVI has benefited greatly from the settlements and lawsuits stemming from Epstein's conviction. So not only did they possibly benefit financially from not saying anything about the crimes, they are also benefiting from the compensation getting dished out in these lawsuits. Now, over $500 million has been dished out to the survivors of Epstein's crimes, and most of that money has either come from his personal estate, JP Morgan, and Deutsche Bank, who he collected millions through, basically financial transactions through his various business partners, that should have raised flags within those two banks. But it didn't. They ignored them. So obviously, these three areas, his financial estate, JP Morgan, and Deutsche Bank, if I am pronouncing that right, I do apologize. Now, that's pretty much where all the money is coming from these lawsuits. Now, it turns out that the government of the USVI has already pretty much gained close to $200 million from a civil racketeering lawsuit and other related settlements against Epstein's estate. And most recently, the USVI filed another $190 million lawsuit towards JP Morgan, claiming that they covered up the crimes and even profited off the crimes committed by Epstein while he had a residence in the USVI. Now, JP Morgan has come out and claimed the opposite, that the USVI has done the exact same thing, and are now refusing to take accountability for their actions and claim responsibility, and are actually using this as some sort of cash grab opportunity, which I very much have to agree with. Many corporations and the government of the USVI most likely got paid under the table to not talk about these things and cover them up. And now they are trying to grab as much money from each other while the money is being dished out. And I think, honestly, this is a terrible, terrible look on the government of the USVI when it's almost a fact that with Epstein's ties to the First Lady of the USVI and possible other politicians, they too didn't disclose the truth of what was happening here. Now, with all that information being said, let's go back to the Ritz Carlton. Now, would it be more reasonable to assume that with all this additional information that we discussed, to think that if this was still going on in different formats, like trafficking at the Ritz, and there being a cover-up within the hotel system, sounds a lot more believable now. We discussed that hotels are a big part of the sex trafficking industry, and if there are still financial motivations to let these crimes continue, people are going to do it. And in the USVI, I find that more likely than not that this is still taking place. Obviously, it takes place throughout the world. But it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume either that with the USVI possibly covering up Epstein's crimes and then trying to grab as much money as they can, they're trying to find and grab as much money as they can. Obviously, the USVI's government is almost kind of detached from the United States. Even though the USVI is a territory, they kind of don't mess with each other, and we kind of leave the USVI alone, or at least that's kind of all the information I found. If anybody has more information in regards to kind of the political landscape of the US and the USVI, let me know, because I didn't do an extensive amount of research on that, so please let me know. I'm more than willing to take a look at it and listen to it, and I do find that fascinating. But maybe you think the response to maybe the initial deleting of the reviews from the Ritz Carlton would have been more swift and attentive, or at least I think so. And maybe some of that money that the Ritz Carlton, if they were committing these crimes, and they were getting financial incentive to do them, I would like to imagine that some of that money would have gone into maybe fixing up the property, because, again, some of those reviews about room maintenance and food and stuff like that are terrible, but that's kind of my little joke to break up the seriousness of this episode. But with all that information said, this episode was very informative for myself and opened my eyes to the broader scope of what is happening in this world, especially in the hospitality and tourism industry, one in which I currently work in. However, do I think that the Ritz could be doing this? Yes, I do. Do I have my doubts about it? Absolutely. But unfortunately, we're in a position in which we truly don't know if this is happening or if this is just some spread around internet hoax that's, just kind of existed on the internet now for the past couple months. Now, whether or not it's real, whether it's fake, whether you believe it's happening, whether you don't, we just have no idea. And if it is happening, we might have to wait for that information to be uncovered and exposed to the public, and that might take a very long time. However, of course, this episode took a different format. Again, not a whole lot of information out there, so I tried to find as much context clues that I could give you, as much background information as I could possibly give you, for you to kind of delve into your own personal opinion. And I hope that you have that. If you have a personal opinion, that one that I did not share, please feel free to reach out to me, leave it in my comment section. I'm more than welcome to hear about that, hear your own personal thoughts, theories, analysis, all of that. I greatly appreciate it. But with that being said, that is going to conclude this week's episode over the Ritz-Carlton St. Thomas Wink conspiracy. Let me know if you liked it. Again, a little bit of a spur-of-the-moment episode, but I hope I did well by this. I hope it was another little kind of detour from what I'm used to. I hope to go back to maybe some regularly scheduled programming pretty soon. I know aliens are in the cards here. I know I haven't done an aliens episode, aliens, UFOs. I haven't done that in a couple weeks. I want to go back to that pretty soon. So yeah, I got a couple episodes dialed up for the next couple weeks that I hope you really all enjoy. And with that being said, if you are listening to this on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe. It helps me out with the algorithm, and I greatly appreciate it. If you happen to be listening on Spotify, turn on post notifications so you get notified every time I post a new episode. And just so everybody's aware, I am officially on TikTok at UnblurringTheUnknown. Same thing as all my other handles. You can check out my account there. I do little 1-minute breakdowns of each episode on there, trying to bring in a little extra traffic to the podcast. And if you have found me through going on TikTok and following all my links, if you found me from TikTok, I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate you checking out my content. But as well, you can also send me topic suggestions to my email, that is unblurringtheunknown@gmail.com. You can send them right to me, and I will put them in the episode queue. I try to get them as quick as I can, but obviously my list is ever growing and seems to have no end in sight. So if you do have an episode suggestion, send it to me there. But with that being said, that is going to do it for this week's episode, and I will see you all on the next one.